Ryan Riess, the ace-jack and the hijack. Makes it 110K. King 6 for Roberto in the big blind. He'll defend. Riess about 15 bigs behind. Comes King 10-5, top pair for Roberto.
Roberto is so fascinating to me. Defending the King 6, Riess with a...
Some curious stuff from Ryan Riess so far in this hand. First of all, just quickly, pre-flop, with 17 blinds, it's kind of normal just to jam ace-jack off. Wouldn't you think, Jonathan?
It is, but this is a spot where he's in a 10K event. He recognizes almost no players probably even at the table. He's almost certainly the best player at his table, if he isn't, he's in the top two. He probably just wants to keep his edge, and shoving ace-jack is a spot where you're often going to not be able to, use any skill. Right, so by doing it this way, instead he gets to realize his positional edge against some players and just play post flop.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. If you really think you're the greatest in the world, as Ryan Riess did once claim, it makes a little sense to want to be able to play post flop.
Yeah, he's the world champ.
He is the world champ from 2013, something like that.
that.
One of those fun years back in the day. Anyway, the more interesting thing that Ryan does on the pre-flop and flop section here is this. That's him checking back this flop, which feels a bit odd. I know in this case, he's right. He's definitely got it nailed as far as what Romanello is going to do. Ryan Riess is going to put money in, Romanello is going to put money in, and he's going to be ahead of Ryan Riess. That is not what Ryan Riess wants, but it feels very standard to bet this flop with ace high and a range advantage.
A really big range advantage, too, on this board. I mean, Roberto Romanello, I understand this is a wet board and a lot of things connect with it, but you see he's calling with King 6 off, right? He's in the big blind. It was only 60K more to call. He is calling super wide here and has a lot of folds. And while you could argue that those folds are all hands that are worse than Ryan Riess's, that's true, but they're still hands that have equity. And when Ryan Riess only has 16 blinds in front of him, he's really happy to win this pot right now and not worry about anything but denying equity and taking it down.
Yeah, as you mentioned on the podcast, Jonathan, it's possible that it's just that Ryan picked up some physical tell on Roberto.
Yeah.
That would make sense considering that Roberto actually does have a hand that is at least calling, maybe with stacked ups, even check shoving, who knows, which of course Ryan couldn't call. In the end, this check works out great for Ryan in that he doesn't get check jammed on or he doesn't put money in behind, but it really feels like a kind of a mistake.
Yeah, and we think that, and the solver agrees also. The solver thinks he's supposed to bet 98% of the time with this exact hand on this board against this opponent with these stack sizes.
That's a lot of the time.
That's pretty
98%.
much always.
Yeah.
You could just close your eyes and always do it, and you're good.
Yeah. Before we hit up this turn card, we got to pay the bills with a little Nitrogen Sports poker.
Yeah, and so that happens a bunch of different ways. First of all, Nitrogen's got sports betting. They've got casino games, and they have poker. And, of course, at the end of every month, they have our special Poker Guys Invitational, which means it's super cheap to play. They guarantee 1,000 buy-ins. We never get more than 100 players. It's an amazing deal.
There's a ton of value there. Check out our Twitter feed. You can see it on the screen right there. When we tweet out about these hands, we tweet out our Nitrogen link. Use that link to get access to that tournament. Let's get to the turn card.
And my goodness, just buries the
Turns
biscuit.
the straight.
Wow, all the gravy.
295K in the pot. Riess was 725K behind.
This sort of wet texture. How much for Ryan Riess? 175 feels right. How about 150? What do we do now? Top pair. I mean, we came along for the ride pre. We hit top pair. I know the board's ugly, but I think we just have to pay him the money here in this spot at least one time. Reevaluate on the river. I'd feel a lot better if I had any sort of club in my hand, clearly.
Does make the call. Ooh, the river is another king.
A disaster.
Yeah.
Really. This is
Never getting away for 575K.
likely to be a full double up here for Ryan Riess. then again, it's Roberto. The guy just he really fascinating as to how he proceeds with his hands. And could he find a hero fold here in this spot? Yeah, maybe. Obviously, ace jack, jack nine, the club's got there. Could he have tens full? You know, unlikely that he'd have king X when you have a king in your hand. He's taking this much time as he, look at this, yeah, disaster.
Just going to lead out. He'll pay off that time bank and he'll pay off Ryan Riess here, most likely. Although, yeah.
Look at this. Riess thinking, God, there's no way he would just have king X, right? I mean,
right, and then, yeah, what else would he do that with?
This is just such a, I told you, Roberto fascinates me. This is an unorthodox, just I'm all in sort of line with this hand. It's, what are we targeting? Do we really think our opponent has a queen and then bets? This might actually work somehow. I don't think Roberto is intending to fold out a hand as strong as ace jack here.
Right. Is this actually going to work as a bluff? Not that it's intended to be one, but will it work as one?
No, this is not intended to be a bluff. In Roberto's mind, this is straight value. He thinks Ryan has a queen.
Hand might be too strong to fold.
I think that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
You're not folding ace jack. You know, sometimes you got to pay in the money. Show me a winner. If you got it, knock the table, good hand, walk away. Always a new tournament tomorrow. And Riess obviously giving credit to Roberto for having a hand like king 10, king queen, pretty much that exactly. Maybe somehow like pocket fives. Maybe a flush you could play this way.
Clubs.
Yeah. You know.
Went check on the flop. Roberto check called a bet of 150K from Riess on the turn. And on the river, it's Roberto leading out here. The effective shove. Riess pained by this decision.
Riess really just saying, okay, are there any bluffs? No. So, in his mind, what value does Roberto have that he's moving all in with? And he's got to decide if it's king X. And I think the bigger part of this is already what he said and vocalizes. My hand is just too good to fold.
That looks like his last time bank that he used, so he'll have 30 more seconds to act, and he's got to make a decision.
I am not a world champion, Jeff. I know that's hard to believe, but I think we have to call.
And Riess, it's just seconds to act. He's gonna have to fold. Time ran out.
That is what one calls a baffling river, if one is so inclined to be baffled, which I am at this time.
I am baffled as well. I'm with you in bafflement.
Yeah, so we can quickly talk about the turn, although there's not so much to say. Ryan Riess makes the nuts straight. Of course, there is a flush possible. Makes a ton of sense for him to bet. Romanello calling makes plenty of sense with king 6 taking this check call line on this card. He wants to keep the bluffs alive for Ryan Riess. That doesn't need to be addressed further. What does need to be addressed first is Romanello deciding to shove the river as a donk bet.
Yeah.
And this is about a pot-sized bet, by the way. I know he made trip kings, but I don't know, man. Like, what is he hoping to happen?
I mean, I think Romanello believes he almost always has the best hand, first of all, right? He thinks Riess is going to bet pocket aces, better kings on the flop. He's going to bet flush draws on the flop. He's going to bet straight draws on the flop. Turns out he didn't. Turns out he checked his gutter. But as we know, the solver wanted Ryan Riess to bet.
Yeah.
Everyone wanted Ryan Riess to bet the flop. He chose not to.
People who've never heard of poker before were shouting from the other side of the ocean, Ryan, you have to bet.
So Romanello thinks he's ahead almost always, and probably also thinks like if he isn't ahead, it's okay because he's going to check call it all in anyway. So if he's losing, the chips are going to Riess anyway. So the only question for Romanello is, does he get more chips by betting and Ryan Riess heroing him, or does he get more chips by checking and Ryan Riess bluffing him? Right? That's it.
Yeah, that is it. Because as you said, he's not going to fold if Riess shoves on him.
No way.
But it's tough to think of hands that you can get called by. Like you said, it's tough to have ace-queen in Riess's range here when he doesn't bet the flop. Is he going to call ace-queen on the river? That's another question.
I don't know.
Same thing with queen-jack, which you would really expect him to bet on the flop. It's an open-ender. It's tough to think of hands that are of value that Riess can call with. Maybe Riess can show up with hands like 8s and 9s with a club, which he might decide to turn into a bluff on the other side of things, which would obviously be great for Romanello, because if Romanello checks this river, he's clearly not folding to a shove.
Right.
To me, I feel like there's a lot more value in capturing the bluffs than there is in trying to get Riess to hero with a somehow worse hand as played than king 6, which feels unlikely to me.
It's hard to argue this point. All I can come up with is Riess certainly is known to hero at times. He has a very famous hero from about a year or change ago where he called with 10 high.
That was a cool one.
An all-in with 10 high he called with, and he was right on the river against Manik Loser when there were 5 left in a big event. So he at least has hero calls. He's capable of hero calls. That's good. So you have to come up with hands that he can hero call with. Ace-queen feels like the most likely one, and that means he still have to check it on the flop. It's hard to come up with stuff.
And not shove it pre-flop, by the way.
That's right.
That's
so right.
I think there's a lot to ask. I think Romanello didn't think this one entirely through. And guess what? The solver says...
Well, the solver definitely agrees this is a check. 96.5% of the time with this hand and shoving the rest of it. So almost always checking it, which of course seems to make sense.
Right. And now we see, and we keep seeing that Ryan Riess is not calling.
No.
What's happening here? He's tanking. What's going on? He started the hand with 17 blinds, Jonathan.
He did.
He has the nut straight, Jonathan. Romanello didn't check raise the turn, Jonathan.
Yeah.
What's he doing?
It's a weird spot. It's just like it's hard to come up with bluffs and value for Ryan Riess and to put things in because of that, because he checked the flop. It's really hard because Romanello check called the turn to come up with really any bluffs at all for him to show up with here. I guess
or
he can
value.
Or value. But like the naked ace of clubs, the solver thinks is a possible bluff for him.
Yeah.
So okay, but he had to check call that instead of check shove or check raise, which you almost think he would always do on that
There's
turn.
multiple problems with the naked ace of clubs being in Romanello's hand here. First of all, he didn't shove on the 17 blind stack pre-flop.
Correct.
A lot of the combos that Romanello is going to show up with that contain just the ace of clubs and not another club are going to be hands that he shoves pre-flop.
Yeah.
Again, if he gets to the turn, which of course he gets to the turn with all of those hands because Ryan Riess checked back the flop, if he just calls pre-flop, how is he not check shoving or leading the turn with a nut flush draw and a straight draw? It feels really likely that he's going to do that as well.
You'd really expect him to be, with all of his strong hands, with all of Romanello's strong hands, that he would be check shoving so many of them. All the hands that turn into full houses, really he's going to just check call the turn and let Ryan Riess get there with a club?
And a lot of those he doesn't have all of the time pre-flop either. King-queen is going to be a shove some of the time pre-flop, right? 10-10 is definitely a shove
100%.
Queen-queen is definitely a shove pre-flop. I think 5-5 is definitely a shove pre-flop for Romanello. It doesn't leave him with many full houses, even pre-flop.
It's like king 10.
And if you give him king 10, is he really going to let Riess see the river? If Riess has some sort of drawing hand or something that can catch up to king 10 on this very wet board?
Seems unlikely, right?
You think it would be a check shove if he's checking the turn at all. He might just be betting the turn with that hand most of the time anyway.
So you're sitting there as Ryan Riess and you're like, okay, I can't really think of any obvious value, so I should call. But now can I think of any obvious bluffs? And I can't. Like we're saying the ace of clubs, but would the ace of clubs really check call the turn when Ryan Riess is this short and he checked back the flop? I don't think so.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you have to assume that Romanello is never really playing a king like this for value. You have to kind of discount the idea, if you're deciding that you might fold this hand, that Romanello would never play a king like this. And I feel like maybe Ryan Riess is applying his own thought process to Romanello, thinking if I were sitting in Romanello's seat and I had trip kings, I would never donk shove the river. Right? And so he assumes that Romanello wouldn't either. But that's a danger in assuming something about an opponent. That's why GTO concepts are very popular among high-level players when playing against tricky or good players. And in this case, the solver says you got to call 99.8% of the time, Ryan
Yeah.
Riess. So, damn, the solver hates this fold.
The only way you're supposed to fold is if you have the ace of clubs in your hand, and then you can fold a little over half the time, if that's what the solver says. But basically, it's an auto call otherwise. And certainly, if we use distribution, which is a normal GTO concept, ace-jack is way, way, way up there in the hands that we would take this line with and end up with.
Oh,
here
absolutely.
On the river.
It just feels like both of these players made pretty fundamental mistakes trying to exploit in a way that feels a little bit over fancy or maybe underthought in Romanello's case.
My best guess is that Riess does think he has a read on Romanello. Maybe he's even correct with his read. Read him for strength on the flop, so he checked back the flop unconventionally. And now on the river is looking at Romanello, as you see he does at times here. Sees strength, does not think he's bluffing, and thinks, I can't beat anything that isn't a bluff. I really can't beat any value. Maybe I can beat King Jack once in a blue moon, but I lose to all the other value. Lose to the flushes, I lose to the full houses. This is a fold. That's all I can come up with as to why he can find a fold here, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense to me. A few really interesting spots here with that the solver strongly disagrees with, and we pretty much strongly disagree with too. What do you guys think? Do you agree with us and the solver, or do you feel like you get why Ryan Riess, for example, is checking the flop, why he's folding the river, why Romanello suddenly goes all in on the river with his trip kings? Let us know in the comments. We absolutely want to hear what you have to say on this one.
Yeah, I mean, this is a curious one. What isn't curious is that you should probably go out and get about 740 copies of our new book, How Can He Fold? Incredible Poker Hands book, broken down decision by decision. You can get it at thepokerguys.net. You can see that in the description of this video. If you go to that website, you can get the ebook right there. You also can click the link to go to Amazon and get the paperback. It is 37 text conversations breaking down hands between me and Jonathan, starting with the least complex, ending with the most complex hands. And guess what? You're going to have fun. You're going to learn. You're going to be a wonderful, happy person.
You know, you get all these books, poker books, you kind of read a third of them and then you put them away. This is not that book. You're going to read this whole book. This book reads fun, it reads easy, and you also will learn stuff. It's a winner.
It's a winner.